We begin. Nathan and Nancy, it is so good to see and hear you. Thank you so very much. Our opening words come from the writings of the author Arundhati Roy. She says, historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it.
Good morning. I'm so glad to be with you in this portal, this computer, phone, iPad device portal where we can do our best to be together in these difficult times. I think that this community too can be a portal into the world we are trying to build amidst all the violence and the illness and the injustice and the struggle. A portal into a community of care and connection where we value the dignity of each human, take care of each other, and bring that love that is the spirit of this church. We're so glad you're with us this morning on Zoom, and you are welcome here. You are welcome here if you are just struggling to get through each day in your home, dealing with the challenges of work and family and pandemic life. You are welcome here if you are heartbroken over the injustice and violence against protesters, against Black people, and all the harm that is happening due to racism and inequality in the pandemic, in our policing, and in so many ways. You are welcome here if you are enjoying this sunny, cool weather, this cello music, and just here to give your soul a moment of respite. You are welcome here. We have a couple announcements to share. One is that our plant fair has been extended. I feel one of the best antidotes to death and destruction and despair is life. And life in the form of plants is accessible to you right now. We have 24 more hours that you can get some of those plants. We have raised $600 for the congregation, but if we bought all the plants at full price, we could raise $1,900 for the church. So please check it out, check your email, and find your way to that octria.com plant auction 2020 website where you can shop for plants and get in on the fun. And there's much gratitude extended to the plant fair team of Delcy Sherrill, Sandy Bozanowski, and Kath Van Prague, who have put in a lot of work to make this experiment happen. And also a reminder once again that after the service, we'll be having a breakout room focused on you, the vote. So if you would like to come to this virtual table at community hour after our worship experience, you can join us for about 15 to 20 minutes, and you'll have to raise your hand in the chat to opt in to that breakout room. And if you're on the phone, I believe that is a *9 to raise your hand, but we'll give instructions once again when service concludes so that you can know exactly how to learn more about this important campaign for voting rights across the country. So there are many ways to settle into this time together, and we will be moving into some beautiful music to bring us into our worship space together.
Trying it
The
out.
ones who circle around to tend these fires.
Annie has got another version she's
We
trying.
shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. Yay.
Thanks.
I think we're going to go now to our Unison Affirmation. Annie?
Yes, thank you. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor, y ayudarnos los unos a los otros.
Friends, this morning we continue our series of Unitarian visitors from around the world with our old friend Maud Robinson. The way the story goes, our parishioners Rich and Nancy Doherty were visiting England, met Maud in a pub, and after a couple of pints, they invited her to come to Bedford. It may not have happened exactly that way, but Maud did come to Bedford in 2007 and served a year as our assistant minister. Maud grew up in Ireland and was introduced to Unitarianism in Dublin. After completing her studies at Oxford for 8 years, she served the Unitarian Church in Edinburgh, Scotland, where our parishioner Peggy Dusenberry and her family were then members. For a time, Maud served our church in Cardiff, Wales. Today, Maud serves the Underbank Unitarian Chapel in Stannington, a suburb of Sheffield, South Yorkshire. First gathered in 1652, its chapel was built in 1743. It is a member of the General Assembly of Unitarian and Free Christian Churches, the umbrella organization for British Unitarians that counts about 7,000 members. At one time, Unitarianism and the denial of the Trinity was a heresy punishable by death. Joseph Priestley, the 18th century famous scientist and discoverer of oxygen, was the organizer of modern British Unitarianism. I should also say that Maud would have loved to join us today, but as it happens, she is helping to lead a virtual service shared by the Unitarians in Dublin and the Fourth Universalist Society in New York City. What a world. And so we are one around the world. We welcome back to Bedford, Maud Robinson.
Dear lovely, lovely people of First Parish in Bedford, greetings and salutations from Sheffield in the north of England. Greetings to all of those who remember me. Greetings to those of you who haven't a clue who I am and who have never seen me before. I'm Maud Robinson. I spent a wonderful year as acting assistant minister with the lovely folk of First Parish in 2007-2008. Good Lord, that is 12 years ago since I finished with you. 12 years. It certainly doesn't seem that long ago. And since then, I spent 8 wonderful years as minister with the Unitarians in Edinburgh, and I have just finished my first year of ministry with 2 congregations on the western edge of Sheffield, which is in the north of England. And here I am in the north of England, settled into my new home here with a lovely garden out behind me, which I didn't have in Edinburgh, and which, my goodness, is saving my life here during our lockdown. We are all locked down, as you are all locked down there in Bedford. And to be able to walk outside my door and to have a garden here, I'm getting into gardening for the first time in my life. Rich Doherty, thank you very much. I'm sure I gained some insight from you in that wonderful year when I lived with you and Nancy for planting things and making them grow. That's certainly one of the things that's keeping me sane here. And in terms of ministering to my congregations, I have two quite small congregations a few miles apart. And one of my congregations, thankfully the one that I'm closer to, has many older members who have never owned or touched a computer in their lives. So like you, I am doing my services on Zoom every Sunday, or whatever app or facility you're using to broadcast your services. But there are some members who are not in touch that way. And every Saturday afternoon, I take a walk around Stannington, which is the little suburb outside of Sheffield where I live. It used to be a standalone village, as Bedford, of course, used to be a standalone village. And I have a 4-mile walk passing 11 houses of elderly, mostly women, who are members of my congregation, and I drop into them a paper copy of my service. And quite often I tap on the door and one of them comes out and speaks to me at the front door, or often the sun has been shining here, they're out working in their gardens, and I go and, at a safe distance, talk to them about their gardens and about my garden. And actually it's been a lovely way for me to get to know some of these older women that live close to me and who are in my new community that I am only just a year into. So in some ways it's so very, very different from Bedford, and in some ways it's similar. You know, people are people everywhere, and lovely Unitarian people who want to think for themselves and work things out for themselves, but gather together and sing and either pray or contemplate or meditate or whatever you're having yourself. We're still doing that here in Sheffield, as I did with you in Bedford, Massachusetts 12 years ago. Love and blessings to you all, and may you all thrive despite the challenges of this time. Goodbye, and from me, God bless, whether you're having God yourself or not. Goodbye.
Thank you. So wonderful to see Maud. And now is the time in our service when we will move to share the joys and the sorrows of this community. And as we have done a number of times, we want to invite you to raise your virtual hand in the chat if you have something that you would like to share. And we also know that John or Annie may have received other notes, and we will get those shared as well. But in the meantime, Marge Heckman, would you like to take us into this time?
Sure. Hi, my name is Marge Heckman, and I am a member of the lay pastoral team here at First Parish. At this time in the service, we invite anyone who would like to share a joy or a concern to raise your hand, and we will call on you. And if you also want to write something in the chat, we can do that as well. I will light one final virtual candle for all of those joys and concerns that we keep in our hearts.
We go now to Annie for a special time of remembrance.
We know that this world is so broken. In our opening words, we heard that a pandemic can be a portal. A pandemic can help us to see more clearly the sickness in our systems, the injustice, and the way that death comes for those who face the violence of white supremacy and poverty more than it comes for those who can buffer themselves with safety. A pandemic can be a portal that we can see our way through to a different world. And I think uprisings too can be a portal to bring us to a different world. This world is so sick, and we are so sad and angry. We grieve for the death of George Floyd. We grieve for the deaths of so many people who have lost their lives to state violence, to the police. But I also can see a different world through the portal. I can see a world where we do not have police anymore because we keep our communities safe. In this great turning, we can learn to lead with love, and we can learn to keep our communities safe with love. And this may seem like a far-fetched dream, but the practices that bring us through this portal and into the new world are right here, right now practices. They are committing not to call the police in our families, in our congregations, asking our friends and our loved ones to do the same. The practices are right here, right now practices of looking at our local budgets and paying close attention to how people use a pandemic to add more and more money to the state, to the police, while taking it away from the places we need it. The practices are right here, right now practices of giving our money to the communities working for liberation. We can move through this portal. We can keep our communities safe. In this great turning, we can learn to lead in love. Because when the world is sick, can't no one be well. But I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong.
When the world is sick, when the world is sick, when the world is sick, but I know it is beautiful, but I know it be beautiful, but I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. The world is beautiful, when the world is beautiful, but I know it be beautiful, but I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong. The world is beautiful, when the world is beautiful, but I know one be beautiful, but I dreamt we were all beautiful and strong.
Thank you, Annie. And friends, there has never been a more important time for the saving ministry of communities like First Parish in Bedford. This community, a community of memory and hope, exists through the generosity and the vision of its members and friends. And although we are physically distant from one another, yet we are and can be together. And so we invite your generosity at this time. The slide on the screen shares the ways in which you can continue to support the good work and the ministries of this congregation. And we hope that you will be generous. We give thanks, and we reflect now with this music from Nathan and Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. So we normally sing together on a Sunday morning, and there are people who don't like singing together via Zoom because it can be a bit chaotic. That, in fact, is probably more appropriate this morning than any morning that we've been on Zoom so far. I'd like us all to sing together the words that are up on the screen with Nathan and Nancy playing along. And if it sounds chaotic, it is, because that's what the world is. It's chaotic, but the words still are meaningful. So let's sing "There Is More Hope Somewhere." Here we go. 1, 2. There is more there is more somewhere. Light the candle, here I find it. There is more hope somewhere.
The historian Barbara Tuchman wrote about the pandemic of the 14th century, the Black Death. How did it end? For a long time, it didn't. There were numerous recurrences. Scientists and historians still debate how the plague was brought under control. Some believe quarantine, the word derives from a 40-day period of confinement, and improved sanitation did the trick. The plague made no sense, and in making no sense, it helped reorder how human beings understood the world. The changes took time. As Tuchman remarked, the persistence of the normal is strong. Yet the Black Death undermined received authority. The shift from faith in institutions, monarchies, aristocracies, papacies, to an emphasis on the individual would be accelerated in the years of the Protestant Reformation and the Scientific Revolution. But Tuckman posited that the roots of modernity can be traced to the disease-bearing fleas and rats of the 14th century. Survivors of the plague, finding themselves neither destroyed nor improved, could discover no divine purpose in the pain they had suffered, Tuckman writes. God's purposes were usually mysterious, but this scourge had been too terrible to be accepted without questioning. If a disaster of such magnitude, the most lethal ever known, was a mere wanton act of God, or perhaps not God's work at all, then the absolutes of a fixed order were loosed from their moorings. Minds that opened to admit these questions could never again be shut. Once people envisioned the possibility of change in a fixed order, the end of an age of submission came into sight. The turn to individual conscience lay ahead. To that extent, the Black Death may have been the unrecognized beginning of the modern era. Cynthia Mork is now going to sing the song May by Gabriel Fauré with a text by Victor Hugo. It speaks to how nature springs to life in May and gives us hope of inner peace and calm, beauty and love.
Puisque mes tout en fleurs dans les plaines vous réclament, viens, ne te lasse pas de bénir à ton âme. Accompagne les lois, les ombrages charmants, les larges clés de nuit au bord des flots dormants. Le sentier qui finit l'horizon que ce monde attache blé joyeux comme il livre au bas de la robe des cieux. Viens et que le regard des petites étoiles qui tombent sur la terre à travers tant de voiles, que l'arbre pénétré de parfums et de chants, que l'eau souffle ambroisie de midi dans les champs, et l'ombre et le soleil dans de la verdure, et le rayonnement de toute la nature fasse d'épanouir comme une double fleur la beauté sur ton front et l'amour dans ton cœur.
Thank you, Cynthia. One of my mentors in ministry, you may recall, was the late rabbi and family systems therapist, Ed Friedman. When clergy or faith communities face a crisis or a conundrum or a turning point, or what in our opening words Arundhati Roy called a portal, an opening unto an uncertain future, Ed Friedman counseled clergy to preach an "I have a dream" sermon. I have a dream, my fellow first parishioners. Some clarion call of hope and aspiration, something that calls us to be more and better than what we are. Something that reminds us, in the words of the great Howard Thurman, that a crown is placed over our heads that for the rest of our lives, we are trying to grow tall enough to wear. You'd like to hear a sermon like that, wouldn't you? And yeah, I'd like to preach a sermon like that too. It ain't easy. As for dreams, I hear that we have been sleeping 20% more since the pandemic began, but that often we're afflicted by bizarre and vivid dreams and sleep disturbances. Sometimes in the morning, Sue and I ask each other about our dreams, and they tend to be quite weird. Sweet dreams are not made of this. Deidre Barrett, a Harvard psychologist and dream researcher, says dreams about bug attacks top the list of crazy COVID-19 nightmares. Swarms of wasps, flies, and gnats to armies of roaches and wiggly worms. Part of it traces to the slang use of the word, she says. We say we have a bug to mean we have a virus. Isn't it swell that our dreams are great punsters? Aren't you glad I brought this up? Sweet dreams. And yes, the cicadas are coming. The cicadas are coming. I have trouble preaching and I have a dream sermon because there is simply so much we don't know about this virus and about our future. Do you recall the old and likely apocryphal story about the first white folks to meet the Aboriginal first settlers of Australia, seeing large animals hopping about to and fro with babies in their pouches? The white folks asked, "What are those?" And the native people said, "Kangaroo." And thus, that's what they've been called ever since. It turns out, however, kangaroo does not refer to those marsupials. In Aboriginal language, kangaroo means I don't know. What are they? Kangaroo. I don't know. What do I see? What is my dream when I look to our future as individuals and as a community, as a congregation, a country, a civilization, an ecosystem? Kangaroo. Please forgive me, but I seem to see the world increasingly through anecdotes. I am entering my anecdotage. And the anecdote I tell about facing an unknown future is again one told by Ed Friedman, the rabbi. He worked in the Deep South as part of the Great Society reforms during the Johnson administration in the 1960s. He recalled a popular barbecue restaurant that was whites only, rigidly segregated by race. A few decades later, he returned to the South and he happened to visit the same restaurant. He discovered that the clientele had become racially diverse, with many interracial couples happily dining together. But that was not his greatest surprise. The menu had changed dramatically. Instead of being a barbecue joint, the place had gone upscale and now featured sushi. Who woulda thunk? What do we see when we look to our future through the portal of this pandemic? We don't know, at least not for sure. And the future is most likely not to be what we may now expect, neither in dread nor in anticipation. I read to you from historian Barbara Tuchman's assessment of the Black Death of the 14th century. How did it end, she asks. For a long time, it didn't. There were numerous recurrences. Changes took time. The persistence of the normal is strong. Nonetheless, the Black Death undermined received authority. There was a shift from faith in institutions, monarchies, aristocracies, papacies, to an emphasis on the individual. Survivors of the plague, finding themselves neither destroyed nor improved, could discover no divine purpose in the pain they suffered. Minds that opened to admit these questions could never again be shut. The end of an age of submission came into sight. To that extent, the Black Death may have been the unrecognized beginning of the modern era. Were I to guess, and hey, that's really all I'm doing, folks, I do not believe this pandemic will usher in a new era of individualism. Yes, we are right to lose faith in many of our institutions, but our eyes have been opened to the systems that have favored the few over the many, the systems that have fostered the privatization of wealth, the systems that deliberately despoil our natural environment, the systems that pervert healthcare into an industry instead of a public good, the systems that monetize and commodify everything, the systems that deny the common good and allow some few to act with impunity, while the lives of so many matter not at all. May this pandemic be a portal to our commonwealth, public welfare, the common good, and systems that assure justice for all whose rights are denied. A woman named Monica Petrucci wrote recently, "I've sheltered in place my entire life and I am sick of it." A 20-something woman born just after 9/11, she's Gen Z and has never known anything but high security airports, a highly surveilled internet, never-ending wars on terror, mass shootings, natural disasters, and the constant scapegoating of immigrants and others, almost always of color. It is no surprise, she says, that Gen Zers are more likely than members of any other generation to report their mental health as fair or poor. At least 27% of Gen Zers struggle with their mental health, compared with 13% of Gen Xers and only 7% of baby boomers. I want to make sure you catch those numbers. My own mental health may not always be a paragon of salubriousness, but it is likely that I and many of my boomer generation are having a 3 times easier time of this craziness than our others. The mental health of our youth and young adults is at extreme risk. In those numbers, friends, is embedded, I think, a clarion call. I have a dream, my fellow First Parishioners, that we as a congregation recommit to our ancient calling to be a center of health and healing and wholeness. On this Pentecost Sunday that commemorates the descent of a Holy Spirit, may we recall that our own religious tradition most identifies with ways that the holy shows itself within and among all that lives. I have a dream that this spirit may be revived in us now. I have a dream that our first parish be a safe place, mostly, but that we always be a brave place. Many of you step up to this challenge now. More are needed. I have a dream that our beloved guest in Sanctuary, Maria, will be reunited with her family in safety and tranquility. I have a dream as well that our parishioners not be constantly called upon to be brave or healthy, but that we have permission to be scared or heartsick or sad or grieving. There will be times I will need to cry with you. I have a dream that our First Parish shall not suffer an edifice complex, but that we shall leave the building. Oh yes, that's right. We've already left the building. But that with every effort of arm and heart and brain, we will use our privileged place on our hallowed town common as a beacon of compassion, justice, and hope, a mighty tool that we may implement and wield. As once we mustered patriots, may we muster the citizens of the 21st century. I have a dream that we will not try to attract a younger generation, but that we will seed and make a place for a younger generation to succeed us. I have a dream that we will dream not of bugs and cicadas, but of human hugs and caresses, a time when we arrive out of many singular rooms and the warmth of their hands assures us the gladness of our spoken names, and it is good to be with one another. I have a dream that this First Parish in Bedford will not only survive this pandemic, but thrive and persist unto an unknown, unanticipated, and surely unexpectedly fecund future. And lastly, First Parish, I have a dream that what we do now will be good enough. Recently, the Canadian government told its workers not to hold to pre-pandemic standards. You are not working at home, they said. You are at your home during a crisis, trying to work. It is a generous distinction. Parents, you're not really parenting, you're managing parenthood during a pandemic. And First Parishioners, you're not exactly worshiping or managing or acting like any of this is normal. No, the truth is that we're all holding it together imperfectly, but as best we can. And so, First Parishioners, I have a dream. What we do now will be inadequate, and it will be good enough. And I have a dream that even now, we may cultivate gratitude and that our blessings be manifold, diverse, and plentiful. Amen? I think now we are going to go into breakout groups. And for the next 10 minutes, the question is, what is your dream? And if there's some way to capture these in the chat or elsewhere and get them back to me, that would be lovely. Take us away to the breakout groups.
We will do that. And friends, just a reminder that you need to accept the invitation that comes up on your screen to go to the breakout rooms. So when you see that pop up, please do, and then you'll be back in 10 minutes.
And if being in a small group stresses you out, you can just hang out here and wait for the rest of the service. There will be a closing afterward, and it is optional. So you don't need to follow if that is not your cup of tea.
Absolutely true. Okay, here we go. John, I believe that we are all back together. So back to you.
Okay, folks, just another couple of minutes, and this is more from Howard Thurman, the same guy who said that a crown is placed over our heads we're trying to grow tall enough to wear. He said, look well to the growing edge. All around us, worlds are dying and new worlds are being born. All around us, life is dying and life is being born. The fruit ripens on the tree. The The roots are silently at work in the darkness of the earth against a time when there shall be new leaves, fresh blossoms, green fruit. Such is the growing edge. It is the extra breath from the exhausted lung. The one more thing to try when all else has failed. The upward reach of life when weariness closes in upon all endeavor. This is the basis of hope in moments of despair. The incentive to carry on when times are out of joint and men and women have lost their reason. The source of confidence when worlds crash and dreams whiten into ash. Such is the growing edge incarnate. May we look well to the growing edge. Annie, closing words?
Beloveds, these are impossible times. And as John reminded us, so many people have lived through impossible times, through plagues and pandemics. And people have lived through slavery and uprisings and genocide and fascism and war. And people have persisted because people have dreamed. And people have seen a world that was different than the one they were living in. And they have lived it into being and loved it into being. And they have raised their children to bring it into being. And it is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We shall learn to lead in love. May it be so.
Amen.
And we go to Nathan and Nancy for our postlude.